Tech Sounds presents EduTrends.
Hi, welcome to the EduTrends presented by the Institute for the Future of Education. This is a Tech Sound podcast, the official podcast of Tecnológico de Monterrey. My name is José Pepe Escamilla, and I'm Associate Director for the Institute for the Future of Education. Today's guest is Isabelle Hau, Executive Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning at the Stanford School of Education. It's a pleasure to have you here, Isabelle.
Thank you for having me.
Very, very pleased to be with you today. We met briefly months ago in ASU GSB this year in 2024. And I was wondering what bring you to education, because I understand that you have worked in the intersection of philanthropy, investment, and then you move now to Stanford with a focus also on research and education. So can you briefly explain what motivated you to make these changes in your career?
Yeah, of course. So education has been obviously a personal endeavor for, that's been transforming my personal journey. I will maybe skip that piece in the interest of time. But from a professional standpoint, I started my career in a different field. I started in finance, of all places. Scaling organizations of all sorts through venture capital and other means. And then about now, almost 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, I switched to, I adapted my career, I evolved my career, leveraging those skills that I had acquired in scaling organizations to impact. So I joined the field at the time of the very nascent field of impact investing. And I had the privilege of joining this amazing organization, Omidyar Network, that was a pioneer in the field of impact investing at the time. I had a great privilege in this organization to start an education practice with my colleague, Amy Clement. So I've been working on education for a long time now. Now 2 years ago in this role at Stanford has been really exciting for me as I see the need, as I was working on all these innovative practices and supporting all these amazing startups, nonprofit, for-profit leaders. I also saw the need for greater connection to research. So how can we bridge better education and education innovation and research, which is essentially what I do right now at Stanford University as part of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. That's the evolution of my journey and career.
Thank you. Very interesting journey and very impactful, always motivated by creating this impact. And I'm sure that what you're doing in the Stanford Accelerator for Learning will be also very important. So tell me a little bit about this Stanford Accelerator. Is this our regular startup accelerator program, or is something different?
Yeah, thank you. This is actually a little different from a traditional startup accelerator. We call ourselves actually a research accelerator as opposed to a startup accelerator, which is a new model. I think we are the only one pretty much in that category of research accelerator.
I'm interested. I'm listening. I like to know more.
So our vision is to have, more research and evidence-anchored solutions in the world that would impact directly millions, hundreds of millions of learners. We have actually a goal of reaching 100 million learners by 2030. With this portfolio of solutions that we are driving. And then we have an even maybe more ambitious goals, which is to change the field of learning overall by having all stakeholders, whether they are educators, whether they are parents, whether they are edupreneurs, understand learning science and research.
Okay, so then can I, so it's a mix, no, that you have research with a certain focus, I understand, accelerates research, but also you work with the people that deliver impact so that they connect with more research oriented. So tell me a little bit about this part of how you work with researchers, and if you are doing something in because it sounds like you accelerate the research capabilities now. So how do you enable this? Because research is usually takes time, no, and takes a lot of time.
Yeah. So there are two things that are actually very important. One is we have a focus on solutions that are research anchored. So research is very important in all we do, but really the key focus in the solution orientation, which is I wouldn't say necessarily new, but which is a much needed in academic research, because typically it stops at an academic paper. So everything we do at the Stanford Accelerator for Learning is thinking not only about the research discoveries, but their application in practical settings and the scaling or diffusion of those solutions in our learning environments. If you allow me, another really important aspect of what we do is our focus on learning. So we are called the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, and not the Stanford Accelerator for Education. And it's quite meaningful because it means two things. One is that we focus on learning overall across age groups. So we start in the very early years, we start at birth, and we have a big center on early childhood education and learning. And we go through lifelong learning with a lot of intersection with the work that you do on adult lifelong learning and workforce learning. But the second piece on learning as opposed to education is that while we believe that a lot of the learning happens in schools, of course, a lot of it also, and maybe increasingly so these days, happens outside of schools. So we are also really interested in all this learning that happens in informal settings, in home environments, in museums, in other settings that are not schools.
Yes, that's also a very important part of learning that we neglect, no? Because many teachers, many professors think that the student can only learn what the professor is in front of him, no? And that's not true. There are many opportunities for learning, and we learn from experience. And I would like to understand how you decide what are the research questions now that you address. So is there a methodology or a way to decide what are the problems you want to address with research?
Yeah. So 3 years ago, when we started, we had a task force that looked at where are the most pressing issues facing learners and learning today. And we have picked 6 focus areas. They may evolve, we may add some over time, but those 6 are, so I mentioned one already, I mentioned 2 already, early learning and adult learning are 2 of those where we need better research, we need better research solutions and more effective and equitable solutions in those 2 areas, in those 2 age groups. But also learning differences is another area where we do exceptional work. We have a big focus on digital learning, where our work on AI and education sits at the moment. We may actually elevate AI and education as a signature project because it has changed like all of our work so much over the past 2 years. And we also have one more area of focus on equity, and the last one on what we call scale, which is system change in education, where we have a big focus, several big projects, one of them on tutoring.
Okay, that the scale one is more like a change in the system.
Yes.
Okay, at the governmental level or how?
Yeah, through education leaders, so educating, leveraging and aggregating existing research knowledge and disseminating it in actionable formats to education leaders. And education leaders, as we both know well, can be at many different levels. They are ministers in some countries. They are state, district, school level in the US, in K-12 settings. Anyway, they are very, different levels that we, and we adapt some of those. Actionable and briefs and toolkits of different sort to different education leader types.
Thank you, Isabelle. And well, you were talking about this research that you're doing. How you connect this research with the other components of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, which are, I understand, the creation of startups, technologies, etc.
Yeah, so we have two vehicles to do that. We have one is what we call an accelerator studio, which is essentially a set of supports that we offer to faculty and students to help move a research finding to practical applications. So we offer partnership supports, we offer technology supports, a variety of supports within that accelerator studio. And then the second thing we have built is an education entrepreneurship hub, which is primarily for students, also open to faculty, staff, and other scholars on campus. That also seeks to promote entrepreneurial mindsets and innovations from our student base, which is quite vibrant within the like you at Monterey, but very absolutely vibrant in our Silicon Valley-based Stanford University context.
Yes, I can imagine. So what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of, moving faster, scaling this research, but also scaling these startup, these solutions and get them to the people that we want to benefit?
Yeah. So right now we are, I know you are working on this and many of us are working on this. We need more collaborations. We are not in a great place, I would say. Let me just give you two stats that I find really interesting. One is about education technology. That latest number that I was looking at a few months ago was 6% of EdTech tools globally have any form of rigorous evidence. So that doesn't necessarily mean that 94% of EdTech tools are not efficacious. It just means that we don't know whether they are or not. So there is a big gap here in how those tools are being used and the knowledge about whether they work. But second fact that also is concerning is the knowledge of educators on learning science. And there are different surveys that have been done by multiple collaborators that suggest that the existing knowledge of our educators, so those that are teaching our children and our learners, is not where it could be. So I think there's a lot more work for all of us to do on also bridging that gap, on ensuring that those professionals who are educating learners are also closer to the research. And I think they want it. It's just that a lot of the research has not been necessarily disseminated in actionable format for them to use.
Yes. So it's very difficult to spread these practices that I founded by research, by science, by evidence that they work, how to spread them. But I would like also to focus a little bit in that part. If I understood correctly, you say that 6% only 6% of the startups have some kind of evidence with a certain level of rigor of what they do. No? So I think this is a very important problem, because what we have in our accelerator program, in all our program for startups in the Institute for the Future of Education, is that we want to have an evidence-based mindset. No? So we, in some cases, we worked with them to develop that evidence. In other cases, also, we train them, no? So they understand what are the basics of this. And and deep in my mind, I would like them to do all impact measurement, very rigorous approach. But I understand that sometimes it's not very compatible, with the world of a startup, particularly when you're starting and you don't have a lot of money, to do things. But what we want is to embed this mindset in what they do, even if they don't do that with some rigor. At least they have a framework to design their tools and the language that they use when they're talking about learning outcomes or motivation or whatever, and understanding that in order for that to occur, that there has to happen certain things, and you have to be able to measure in a certain way, even if you don't have the resources or the money to do that. But this mindset is very important, and we need to infuse this in the EdTech startup ecosystem.
I love what you're saying. I love the focus on mindset and behavior change that you're taking, as opposed to necessarily pushing for evaluations everywhere. That's not necessarily what we are advocating either. A lot of methodologies in evaluations have their own limitations, but rather, how can we infuse the existing knowledge from academia, from research, in ways that are changing mindset, is a really, really, really beautiful way to frame it. I really, really appreciate what you're saying, and we are very much on the same page.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm very happy that it resonates with what you're doing at the Stanford Accelerator.
The other, and I don't know how you are doing it yourself, but another big focus of ours is ensuring that we are promoting co-design practices, and co-design ideally include, EdTech developers for EdTech tools, as well as researchers and educators. And often, as we know, educators are not involved. Research is often not involved in the development, or is involved post facts, not at the initial inception of an EdTech tool. So, how can we create those spaces that allow for these co-design practices to flourish in our systems?
That's a very interesting approach, to include the end user and the researcher, and the conversation is something that we believe is necessary, but I don't remember an example of that. So I think we're still something to learn from you in that space. Can you tell me, Isabelle, some of the research projects or startups or programs that you have created? Give me a couple of examples of the ones that you could.
Yeah.
Well.
Yes, so there are obviously many that are different stages of progress. Some that are student-led, some that are faculty-led, some that are coming from the external world where we are supporting. Let me give you a few examples. So one is the ROR, which is an acronym which stands for Rapid Online Assessment for Reading, which is a very effective and rapid way to do early reading assessment online. So the heavily researched, because it started by one of our amazing faculty, Jason Yitman here, who has done tons of research on this tool and showed that it's equally effective to existing solutions, or if not more effective in some places. But the really interesting aspect of this tool is So it's now been scaling to many learning environments throughout the US, and I understand also that there were some recent discussions in Latin America. So maybe expanding your way soon. The benefit of this tool is that, at least in the US context, most reading assessment is being done at third grade level, because we have these big tests at third grade. And third grade for early reading, and specifically for dyslexia concerns, is very late. So that means that a child has gone through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, without any interventions or supports. So it's very late. So the benefit of this tool is that we can bring these early reading assessments much earlier. So from a family and child standpoint, transformational, absolutely transformational. If we can bring it to kindergarten, or even Jason was testing the tool for preschool, we can imagine then better supports and better interventions on dyslexia in particular, which is a much needed space for better intervention and supports for many families and children.
So yes, that's one of the advantages of technology, that you can, with a good research support, you can do things more efficiently that will not be possible to do it
Exactly
in professors or teachers.
Exactly. But maybe another example. Let me pick an example from a student project that now has graduated. So one of our amazing alumni, Aditya Vishwanath, who is a founder of an organization called Inspirit VR. So who has been using VR technologies. He did his PhD on the impact of VR technologies on learning. And the tool is now, so it's for STEM education in particular, where students are being brought into these VR environments to study STEM. A lot of a very impactful solution that has now multiple exclusive arrangements with the likes of Meta and Pinterest and other, so has been now deployed to millions of learners. Anyway, so just a really interesting solution that one of our now very proud alumni has developed and scaled. And we supported the students through some of the things that I described earlier. So some of our Accelerator Studio support, some of the funding, convenings, and other things that we do for supporting those types of solutions.
So you were talking about these projects that have somehow scale, no? And what do you think are the more important challenges in terms of when you're trying in this process, no? When you're trying to scale an innovation?
Lots of challenges. So there are some that are academic related. So in academic institute, let me start there because that's a really important one in my mind. So for faculty-led projects, it's very tricky because the incentives in academia are centered on academic publications. So the number of papers that are being published, the number of citations, those are the marks of success. The mark of success for an academic on a faculty are not scaling impact. So the good news is that most faculty, if not all faculty that I have the privilege of working with, want to actually see their solutions have the most impact it can get. But there is a misalignment in incentives in academia, and this vision of scaling research into practical applications at scale. And then in scaling solutions, there are also some other challenges. a big one that we are facing is context variability in across different school systems. So, for example, we just did a big we have a big project underway in ethnic studies in California, because it was mandated to be adopted by all high school in California. So we have a number of researchers that have agreed to develop some solutions for ethnic studies. But ethnic studies is inherently a local, context-based type of issue. So how do we scale any of the solutions to different contexts is a really interesting and fascinating question. I would say I'm sure that you're experiencing the same. I mean, another big challenge regarding scaling is resource disparities. So we work in school contexts or in other learning environments that are well resourced. So think about schools in Palo Alto around Stanford are extremely well resourced, for instance, but we also work with schools that look very different from the Palo Alto schools. So how do we adapt those solutions to different settings is a big constraint. And then the last one that I would love to also speak to, especially around that connects to the work that we are doing on AI, is capacity building. So a lot of those solutions require some form of training, whether so the training ideally is embedded within the solution, but sometimes require external training. And we are experiencing this for AI tools overall, is how do we also support those solutions and surround them with capacity building professional learning solutions for those who are using those tools.
Wow, thanks. Very good answer for that. I was very interested on seeing the diversity of challenges in those areas, and the fragmentation is for sure one of them, and the lack of resources. But I would like to focus a little bit on this last one, which I think is a problem with many technologies, not only technologies in education, but technologies in the workplace, etc. That when you change something by introducing a technology, it could also work for a methodology or a different way of working. But particularly for startups that have worked a lot now in their solution and have think a lot on their solution and have worked even with professors or teachers on that, with students. So they think they have now the secret sauce to solve a problem, and they want their solution to be scaled. But there's something that is schools, systems, and learning ecosystems are composed of humans. Non-humans are inherently resistant to change. So there has to be a change management in place that includes the training you were talking to, but there has to be a management of that is more important. And I think that many startups doesn't take into account how their solution will insert into that ecosystem, the relationship between the different people, the way they work, the time they start, the time they finish, the different things and activities they have to do, and how that technology or how that methodology interacts or interferes with what is already in place,
Yeah. Huge challenges. And we are seeing this right now with artificial intelligence tools, where more and more teachers are deeply curious about certainly learning, but also using some of those tools. But they also want to have, they also want and need the proper trainings to understand the concerns or limitations, be potential privacy and safety concerns, or ethical concerns or equity concerns that are related to those technologies. but also need some trainings on use cases on how to think about applying those tools in their contexts for their children or for their classroom or for their learning environments. So yeah, that's a huge challenge right now in the adoption of AI tools that we are trying to help at Stanford with professional learning activities for students, for educators, providing experiential learning spaces. We actually have built a physical one, which is a fun one, the AI Tinkery, that sits within one of our buildings, where we invite scholars and educators and community partners to come and tinker with AI tools. So we are strong believers that people need to try those tools and experience them for what they need.
Yeah, thank you, Isabelle, for that. So we're arriving at the end of our session. I want to ask you a last question about your opinion on the future of education. You've been talking about AI and other things, so I'm really interested with the vast knowledge that you have from your research in different areas and the connection with the ecosystem that you have with startups and the needs. What's your take on the future of learning? Well, you say that what you do is learning. What's your take on the future of learning? I know that it's very wide. You can focus on one sector if it's easier. So I'll leave to you the option.
Yeah, it's pretty broad as a question.
Yes.
But let me try to answer it with more personalized, more technology integrated, more socially connected. And then I think we also need to have a greater emphasis on skills and competencies of the future overall in our learning environments, whether they are critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and adaptivity of our future, of our learners to thrive in our dynamic future.
Yes, good answer, very fast and concise. Thanks, Isabelle. I also believe that those skills are very important in the future, because those skills make us thrive in our professional and personal lives, and are also things that are more perdurable. No, this disciplinary knowledge is not perdurable over time. You have to update it. But those collaboration, critical thinking skills that are called soft skills, I like to call them power skills, because they are so important. Is one of the things that we should be focusing on in education.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Isabelle. I enjoy our conversation. I hope you enjoy it too. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy it when they hear it.
Thank you. This was great. And thank you again for inviting me and the Stanford Accelerator for Learning.
It was great to have you, and looking forward to working with you.
Same. Bye-bye.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/edutrendspodcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tech Sounds team. Tech Sounds producer, Miguel Mejia. EduTrends producers, Esteban Venegas and Christian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tech Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.